Airbnb's 21 winter release comes down to three things. 1. Airbnb wants more listings. 2. Airbnb wants more bookings. And 3. Airbnb wants you to think that it's a very unique platform. So more listings. Well, they've released AirCoverage, for example. AirCoverage is their protection product. They've just killed the famous Airbnb Host guarantee and replaced it with a series of new protections and insurance products. So AirCoverage basically replaces AirCoverage replaces the host guarantee, liability insurance, and adds things like pet damage protection, deep cleaning protection, and more things. So it's more complete. It replaces things that had been in place for 10 years. And why is it important? First, because it addresses one of the biggest barriers for Airbnb's growth in terms of supply. People are just afraid of listing their place. They're afraid of damage. So in order for Airbnb to grow its listings, it has to go back to what it did 10 years ago, which was coming up with something really striking that would make people think, okay, I'm safe to list my place on Airbnb. They have this $1 million protection for me. That's what Airbnb is doing by extending this to also more kind of damages, like pet damage. Makes sense. Airbnb really wants you to come with your dog to a place, especially with remote working. You may want to book a place for a long time, come with your whole family and your dog. So in case of damage, makes sense to protect the hosts. Another way that Airbnb wants to grow its listings, it's through the Ask a Superhost program. So this program has been around for actually almost 6 months now, more or less officially. What's new is that it's been expanded to way more countries and way more languages, right? Now it's available in 30 languages and 196 countries. Why is it really? Well, the goal here is for Superhost, actually ambassadors, so handpicked people that Airbnb is choosing, is to have this Superhost/ambassadors connect with people who may want to be listing on Airbnb but not quite sure about it. And these ambassadors will talk with these people, nurture them, and have them create the listing and have them get a first booking. And then they will get hundreds of dollars. These Superhost ambassadors will get hundreds of dollars if they get things done. So that's the goals of this. So it is impressive because it's a very smart way for Airbnb to leverage its community to grow its supply, right? So suddenly you have all these very entrepreneurial people, the Superhost, going around trying to answer questions. And what's interesting here again is that some people may land on Airbnb's page, may think about hosting, but not quite ready. And here Airbnb is connecting them with Superhost, who will hold their hand and get things done. 2. More bookings. Airbnb really wants to get more bookings. So to do that, it really wants to make sure that if a traveler lands on Airbnb's pages and selects a property, that everything on the property page will really drive up conversion, right? Airbnb wants to have reliable and useful property descriptions, for example, right? And to do that, they're getting AI, human Airbnb reviewers, even hosts to step in and make sure the information is reliable and useful. First way to do this is through AI. Basically here they have a new translation engine that makes it easy for all the content to be instantly translated. As a host, you may have entered your information in a couple of languages, maybe English or French, but you need a really relevant translation machine to make sure people reading this in Chinese will actually get this. So they have a new translation engine that actually is able, for example, to understand some slang or idiomatic expressions and translate this in a way that makes sense to the user. So better descriptions, more reliable, means higher conversion. Number 2, another way to do this is by using human reviewers. In a case of, for example, accessibility, let's say for people who have special needs, for example, Airbnb will have human reviewers check every photo that you may have about how much your property is accessible, and check this against guidelines. So that's another way for Airbnb to say that their photos or what they're presenting, the information, is reliable. A third way to make sure the description, the content, is reliable and useful is, for example, to get hosts to check information. That's where the new Airbnb Wi-Fi speed tool steps in, right? Hosts at their property can test the speed of their Wi-Fi and then have this recorded and displayed in their property listing. So there are three ways through AI, human reviewers at Airbnb, or even host, that Airbnb can increase the relevancy of its property descriptions and then get more bookings. Now, the third thing that Airbnb is doing with this winter 2021 release is making sure that you think that Airbnb is a unique platform, that it's not Vrbo, it's not Booking.com, it's not another platform. And what's been very, very important to Airbnb is in that fight is to use all the unique properties it has. The yurts, the tree houses, all the things that Airbnb usually features in its PR communication. It's actually very important because a lot of them tend to be unique to Airbnb, one. And two, even if most people end up booking a condo, in the end, that's what Airbnb wants you to think when you have the word Airbnb in your mind. It's also quirky places, things you don't find anywhere else. So that's what this big button you've seen appearing on the website called I'm Flexible. I'm Flexible. That's what I'm Flexible is about, is to help you discover new property types that Airbnb has, tree houses and yurts. So what's happening now is, for example, Airbnb has added more categories to this unique stays that you can discover through I'm Flexible. They've added, for example, places where you can ski in, ski out, or they've added as well the luxury properties, which in a way it's interesting because luxury properties, was sort of a bit abandoned by Airbnb at some point. Now they're back. That's interesting to see whether it means that there will be more for luxury properties in the future. But also, if you take a step back, what Airbnb is doing here is very interesting. Basically, they are spinning on its head the way people usually search for places, right? Instead of telling them, where do you want to go? And showing them places, they say, in what place do you want to stay? A luxury villa, a tree house, and then they show them places nearby that fit that property type, that match this property type. It is interesting because it means that Airbnb is trying to point demand where it has supply. What I mean here, probably they don't have supply properties everywhere, right? They probably have big gaps in some areas, especially in non-urban areas. So here is the way to say, well, instead of showing if people search a destination and we have gaps, let's not show the gaps. Let's flip it. For categories like these unique stays where we don't have a lot of supply, let's have people search for the property type and then show them the places, maybe the few places, where we have anything to show. That's really what Brian Chesky means when he's saying that Airbnb now is able to point demand where they have supply. It's like, don't look here, look there, in a way. Look here, I got a lot of supply. Or they're really enabling this. Again, that's a way for them to have higher conversion. It's way better to get people to see things that Airbnb has rather than people finding gaps in the whole of Airbnb supply. So these are really things we've seen. Obviously, the release is about getting more listings, more bookings, and still helping change perception that Airbnb is not just about booking a weekend for two in a big city. It's also about vacation rentals, luxury places, tree houses, quirky places. And in that, it's really, really been consistent with everything that Airbnb has been doing in 2021.